of the most common statements to grievers is, "You just need to stay positive." And while that phrase usually wants to make me shriek, I have to admit that there is some buried wisdom in that sentiment. Today, we will explore the role of negative and positive mindsets in grief and why they are both so important in your grieving process. Watch to the end when I actually offer some suggestions of how and why to stay positive while you are grieving. Welcome to Grief Support That Works. I'm Jo McRogers. I'm a therapist who specializes and dedicates her practice and this YouTube channel to doing grief differently. You can help our grieving community by liking, subscribing, and turning on the notifications bell so that the YouTube algorithm will recognize all the important work we are doing here in order to do grief differently. I also read all of the comments that you leave, and I thank you for these as I learn so much from your sharing. Our society is programmed to rush through grief, to get it done. There seems to be a magical 3-month period of grace, and then we are supposed to return to life as it was, just without our person. No doubt staying positive supports this narrative. But where we go wrong with this saying is that staying positive is usually suggested as a means of suppression, of denial, and of stoicism. This is so contrary when we know that what grief actually and truly needs is a strong presence with all of its emotions and all of its implications. So staying positive is a flawed path on its own. So while we explore the need for some positivity in our grief, we need to first look at how we as human beings are hardwired for the negatives. Our natural negativity bias influences many aspects of human behavior, including perception, memory, decision-making, and social interactions. We will remember negative experiences more vividly and for longer periods of time than positive ones. Now, it's important to know the value of this negativity bias. Negativity bias is thought to be an adaptive mechanism that has evolved in humans and other animals over the decades, over history, in order to promote survival. By paying more attention to potential threats and dangers, we can be better prepared and protect ourselves from harm. Feeling a heightened state of threat or danger is often how grief feels. So this makes sense that a negativity bias would kick in. Next, our negativity bias also validates all of our emotions. The questions of, how can this be my life? Why did this happen? I will never feel better. No one understands me and my loss. How can everyone else just go on with their lives? Each of these beliefs validates being on guard, isolating to threats and fears. Can you now see how a natural protective negativity bias plays an important role in our grief? Tell us in the comments below if you have felt more drawn towards the negatives when you have experienced a loss. What false truths did your negativity bias tell you? Let us know also if you have felt judged for not just staying positive by those around you. When grieving, we may have difficulty remembering positive memories of the person who has died. And we may instead focus on negative memories of the process of the death, of the shock, of the trauma, of our grief, of our guilt, and of our remorse. We may also become more highly sensitive to the negative emotions, such as sadness or anger or guilt, and we may have difficulty experiencing any positive emotions or moments or memories of the person who has died. Grief is greedy, and it will at times demand all of our time, attention, emotions, and effort. Naturally, this time, attention, and effort will be drawn towards the negatives. Grief brings us a whole buffet of negatives, but we need to address the asymmetry of positive and negatives. I want you to know that being drawn towards all of the negatives, drawn towards the loss, the fear, the pain, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the flashbacks, the run-on thoughts that we can't stop, the inability to think or focus or make decisions, the feelings of being separate from the rest of the world, the zero tolerance for small talk or other people's issues, the guilt, the remorse that we experience are all a natural product of our hardwired survival negativity bias. This doesn't mean you are being negative or not having the ability to just stay positive. The negativity bias in grief is normal and serves as an adaptive response to loss. It can help us to process and to cope with our grief while seemingly feeling safer. However, if the negativity bias becomes so strong or persistent, it can lead to an extended negative cycle of thoughts and emotions that can actually worsen our grief and make it more difficult for us to heal. Challenging our hardwired negativity bias does not happen naturally or casually, and this is where we need to challenge ourselves. Stay positive is often offered as a substitution for feeling like shite. And this is where our narrative goes very, very wrong. I strongly believe that the natural supportive negativity bias needs to be appreciated, respected, and then challenged. So now we move on to the concept of a positivity bias. Because we are hardwired to detect and assign huge value to threats, assigning value and detection of positives does not come naturally. Cultivating a positivity bias can help to counteract these negative thought patterns and cycles. Working to establish equal and opposite biases can help to bring a sense of balance and hope and comfort and resilience during a time of intense sadness and loss. And I believe that finding a way to connect and honor with our grief and with the person that we love who has died can help bring a sense of connection and forward momentum to our grief. This act of attending to positives can invite the possibility that our grief in our life may not always feel under siege and in threat of danger. By focusing on the positive aspects of life, such as gratitude, self-care, and positive relationships, people who are grieving can find a sense of purpose and direction that can help to guide them through their grief process. This is now where we need to be super, super careful about the whole toxic positivity push that I see all the time in grief. Creating a positivity bias is only meant to have a means to meet the hardwired negativity bias. It is not meant to be a substitute. Do not just try to switch positive thoughts for negative ones, because that is a trap. A positivity bias can help to promote emotional well-being, resilience, and healing integration during the grieving process. However, it is important to remember that grieving is a unique and individual experience, and that we will each approach it in our own way. A positivity bias should be seen as a helpful tool for coping with grief, rather than a requirement or an expectation in your grief. So, how to cultivate a positivity bias while grieving? Here are my thoughts. Please practice self-compassion. It is important to be gentle and patient with yourself as you navigate your grief process. Allow yourself to experience the whole range of emotions and be kind to yourself during these really difficult times. This is a learning curve, and each time it's a new and different grief. It's a learning curve. Give yourself permission to experiment and research about what supports you. Don't assume that you should know how to do this. I have tripped myself up several times when someone that I care for has died, because after all, I'm the grief specialist. I should know how to do this. But it's much more comfortable for me at those points to lose someone through my professional persona than me as the one who loved them. That was the trap. That just made my grief that much more messed up. Please don't repeat my mistake. Self-compassion is a core key to doing your grief please engage in self-care. Taking care of your physical and emotional needs can help to remind you of what you do have control over. Hydrating, movement, even if it is just from the bed to the couch, not necessarily exercise. Some semblance of nutrition, trying to support your disrupted sleep patterns, or saying to yourself, I allowed myself to stay under the covers today. Each of these can have little micro gains in being able to say to yourself, this is how I supported myself and my grief in this moment. Please invite in a focus on positive memories. While it's natural to experience negative emotions and memories while grieving, attempting to cultivate a focus on positive memories of your loved one is helpful. At some point, you might consider creating a scrapbook or a memory box that honors and celebrates your loved one's life and your positive experience that you shared with them. This may take some time, as many of us can't look at photos early in our grief, so be careful with the timing of this for yourself. But visuals leave a strong imprint on our brains and our hearts. So if you have a lot of distressing visuals about the death, know that this will be an important task at some point to challenge flashbacks or run-on thoughts that come from the thought distortions of grief. I made a video about the normal thought distortions that happen in grief, and I will make a link to that available right at the end of this video. Next, practice gratitude, and this is a tricky one. Not feeling grateful when you are grieving does not make you an ungracious person. The workaround is to create a small moment in your day and a small place in your mind to rehearse gratitude. I often ask my clients to look for the moment in the day that was the best moment, because even in a really horrible day, there is still a best moment. When we are deep in grief, that best moment can simply be the statement, well, no one that I love died today. Making this a conscious practice is a gratitude practice. It helps to meet all of the feelings of being harmed, vulnerable, and under siege. It is a practice of presence and control, both of which your grief needs. Lastly, please seek support, therapy, peer support, groups, online forums for grievers, art therapy, journaling therapy, grief walking groups, grief yoga. Finding places where your grief is expected and welcomed will help you and encourage you to be with your grief. And then you can begin to observe others who are sharing their challenges and their gains in being with their grief. This provides authentic inspiration while we are grieving, and it is critical. It is one of the 4 I's to support grief that I strongly believe in, and I also made a video about that one, which I will follow up with at the end of this one. The 4 I's to doing your grief work. Always remember, cultivating a positivity bias does not mean ignoring or suppressing negative emotions, but rather learning to challenge or balance them with the potential of positive thoughts and experiences. By making an intentional relationship with self-care, with seeking support, and inviting in positive memories and experiences, you can begin to cultivate a response to meet your natural negativity bias while you are still honoring yourself and your grief. Tell me, does this video make sense to you? Tell me what I've overlooked. Can you begin to see the value of staying positive through the lens that I have offered today? I honestly didn't think I would ever make a video about positivity and grief, but there you have it. Research, wisdom, and learning curves, and some personal scar tissue have brought us here today. As you work to bring some challenges to your natural negativity bias, I send you kind thoughts, kind words, and a kind heart. Please subscribe so you don't miss my next video, where I talk about knowing if you are doing your grief work well. Thank you, and I will see you again.